Kash Patel shuts down Joy Behar on live TV, a viral defeat. She never saw coming. A hush fell over the bright studio of The View as Kash Patel stepped onto the stage. Cameras rolled, live broadcast, voters watching. He was not just another guest, he was a former national security advisor, a lawyer, a conservative voice with a reputation for clarity and conviction. Opposite him sat Joy Behar, veteran host and progressive torchbearer. Her eyes glinted with the ease of someone used to owning the narrative. Behind them, the rest of the panel and audience waited for the fireworks. As the show began, Joy launched in. "Kash, you're here to defend conservative policies again," she began, voice calm but sharp. "Tell us why so many people think it's all just wokeness pushback." Kash breathed in. He'd prepared for this moment. He replied steady and measured, "This isn't shallow theater. We're talking real dollars, real consequences. I'm here to show you exactly why wokeness matters and why we should all care." Joy leaned forward, a smirk playing on her lips. "Without wokeness, you wouldn't even have this seat, Kash." Silence. The panel tensed. The audience leaned in. Joy seemed certain she had the knockout blow. But she didn't see what was coming next. Kash paused, then looked directly at the studio lights. "Let me unpack that," he said softly. "You said I owe this seat to wokeness. Let me show what that really means, how taxpayer money's being rerouted, agendas being enforced, and conservative voices being silenced." At that moment, the studio lights dimmed slightly behind him. Graphic slides filled the screen. X billion dollars in federal grants to equity programs. Percent increase in public school funding tied to social justice curricula. Receipts contracts with Sesame Street global activism campaigns. Each bullet flashed on screen. Each one grounded in government reports. Each one pulled the rug out from under Joy's slur. Joy faltered. She opened, her mouth closed. It scanned the studio, but words wouldn't come. Kash pressed, "Here's the problem. Progressivism has moved from ideas to institution. It's funneled through your favorite shows, your kids' classrooms, even Sesame Street, and it's all paid for with your tax dollars." He paused. The studio buzzed. Even his opponents were taken aback. Joy's face tightened. She leaned in again. "You're cherry-picking, you're fear-mongering," Kash countered immediately. "No, these are numbers. Documents, contracts, they speak for themselves." The audience murmured. Bennifer, Whoopi, and Sunny looked sideways, uncertain. Joy sputtered. Kash continued, voice rising but still controlled. "Let's be honest. Conservatives aren't afraid of progress. We're afraid of mandated ideology when every dollar, every curriculum, every program pushes the same social agenda. That is activism masquerading as policy." Joy swallowed. She initiated a retort but stuttered as the facts hit her. Kash pressed his advantage. If progress is about inclusion, why are dissenting voices shut down? Why is any pushback labeled as hate that isn't open debate? That's manufactured consensus. Then he dropped the final point. "This isn't about me or wokeness. It's about free speech, taxpayer oversight, and trust. If we can't question, we can't govern." A beat passed. The panel stared. The audience held its breath. Joy's usual edge was gone. She glanced at the prompter, blinked away a question she'd prepared, and shifted focus to Whoopi. But the damage was done. Kash leaned back. He let the tension hang. He had delivered not with shouting, but with data. Not with bluster, but with precision. In that moment, he transformed. Not a guest, a voice. A spark. Joy attempted recovery. "Okay, fine, but you're ignoring this." But her argument sounded hollow. Kash smiled, but didn't interrupt. Instead, he turned to camera. "America asks questions. Examine the funding. Insist on accountability. That's how democracy survives." The studio shifted. The glow of his message lingered. As the segment ended, the screen faded out, but the ripple had begun. Behind the scenes, producers whispered. Editors paused. Lawyers watched. Out in the country, viewers paused their remotes. Some glared, some nodded. Social media lit up within seconds. And live right then, a new narrative took hold. Kash Patel had flipped the script. The studio cut to a quick break, but the tension didn't dissipate. When cameras resumed, Kash Patel and Joy Behar were back in the hot seat. This time, Joy began with a pointed remark. "Let's dig into that Sesame Street taxpayer-funded activism." "That's absurd." Cash nodded respectfully at the panel. Let's talk reality, he said. He tapped a button. Another chart flashed. $250 million federal education grants distributed since 2020 for diversity training. 45% RISE curriculum initiatives tied to social justice frameworks. 10 contracts, Sesame Street workshops in public schools funded by the Department of Ed. Quiet settled. Even those on the left felt the weight. Joy cleared her throat. But those are grants optional. Don't conservatives use them too? Cash leaned forward. Optional in name, mandatory in practice. Schools that reject social justice programs risk audits, denial of funding, even state watchdog investigations. He clicked again. Email scrolled on screen public statements from school districts complaining about funding pressure. One read funding withheld unless we adopt mandated equity training. Joy's gaze flicked down at the prompter. She tried deflection. That happens all the time. Schools push back on new requirements. You're sounding like a conspiracy theorist. Cash's next words came measured but firm. This isn't theory, it's documented, it's institutional, and it's being enforced through your tax dollars. The panel murmured. Sonny interrupted Cash. Are you accusing the federal government of indoctrination? Cash paused. Yes, not just me. Thousands of educators and parents have reported this pattern. We have emails, FOIA requests, grant conditions. It's not propaganda, it's policy. Joy's expression hardened. This is worry-mongering. Security grants help at-risk students. Cash cocked his head. Then let's see the data. Where's the line between helping vulnerable kids and mandating ideology? Where does support end and indoctrination begin? Another slide appeared. A flowchart. Shutter. 1. Grant approved, equity goals stated. 2. Curriculum adjusted to meet goals. 3. Instructional materials vetted against those goals. 4. Funding release contingent on compliance reports. He paused. That's not social justice. That's social engineering. Joy exhaled. You're twisting policy into politics. Cash pressed onward. Let's move beyond conjecture. Here's a FOIA email thread from the Dept of Education to a district in Texas, dated March 2024. Compliance report due. Failure to report will delay Q4 disbursement. He scrolled to show the actual message. The audience gasped. Panelists leaned closer. Cash continued, what executive says this, comply or lose funding? That's oversight. This is coercion. Joy's next question sounded rehearsed. Corrections, your channel uses these programs too. You campaign with grants, you push narratives. Cash answered swiftly. Campaign grants are regulated, there's transparency, reporting, audits. You can walk away. Here you can't walk away without consequences. The studio grew quieter. Even the audience seemed to absorb every word. Joy pressed once more. You're against equity. Cash offered clarity, not conflict. I'm not. I'm for choice. For transparency. Let parents choose what their kids learn, not administrators enforcing ideology with your tax money. He ended with a statement, not a flourish. We can support vulnerable kids and foster diversity without coercion, without turning public institutions into political platforms. A brief pause passed. Then Joy shifted. Well, I still think, Cash cut in gently, let's invite voices from the field. Educators actually affected. The producer called in a guest Dr. Linda Hale teacher from Iowa. She joined. Cash nodded. Joy turned to Dr. Hale. You're here because Cash believes you've experienced this firsthand. What's your story? Dr. Hale spoke clearly. We had a grant for STEM outreach, then they required equity training first. Our school didn't have the trainers. We lost $150,000. That money won't come back. She continued, it wasn't about curriculum. It was about ideology. We didn't refuse, but we couldn't comply. Another audience murmur. The camera cut to Joy. Her expression changed. Cash summarized, this is proof. Taxpayer-funded grants carrying ideological strings, not one-off, a pattern. Joy exhaled again. Okay, but what's the solution? Cash smiled slightly. Transparency, parental control, funding tied to performance, not ideology. Let's depoliticize taxpayer funds. The panel debated, but Cash had set the frame. Equity is fine, coercion is not. As the segment closed, camera focused on Cash for the final word. Democracy isn't about who controls the narrative. It's about who asks the questions and who gets to answer them. A beat of silence. Then, cut. Backstage, the crew buzzed. Joy paced, refocusing. The studio reset for the next segment, but echoes remained. Outside in living rooms, some replayed the clip. Conservative circles praised his logic. Progressive ones bristled. Social media tweeted Cash spoke facts. He's right, it's about control, not compassion. Joy got schooled. She always shuts conservatives down. That night, liberal op-eds criticized the segment. Right-wing sites praised its clarity. And somewhere deeper, Catholic and Jewish voices, minority leaders were nodding. This wasn't just politics. This was national conversation. The moment cameras cut from Dr. Linda Hale's remarks, Kash Patel could feel the energy shift. The audience, once neutral, now sat forward. Social media was already lighting up. Joy Behar frowned, flipping papers as if searching for a lifeline. Kash pressed on with composure. He addressed Joy directly. You asked for solutions. We need structural change. He laid out a plan, transparency mandates for all federal funding. Essay or parental opt-outs from ideological content. Independent audits of how grants are used. Competitive funding based only on measurable outcomes. Joy sighed. Sounds good in theory. But who decides? Who defines ideology? Kash didn't hesitate. The people. Local communities. Independent boards, not federal bureaucrats. Let teachers teach, let parents guide. He clicked to a slide showing state-level programs that removed ideological clauses and saw no drop in funding. Some saw slight improvements in participation and grades. Joy leaned in. Which states? Kash pointed: Georgia, Florida, Idaho. After removing equity mandates, their education funding remained stable. Some improved outcomes in reading and math. Joy's eyes narrowed. Correlation isn't causation. Kash acknowledged it, true. But transparency allows us to evaluate impact. Right now, taxpayers don't know what their money enforces. That's the debate. A producer signaled for the next segment a rapid-fire questions round. Joy started strong, listing programs from Sesame Street to Diversity Day at the Pentagon, accusing Kash of wanting to defund important social initiatives. Kash pivoted. I'm not opposing social initiatives. I'm asking, do they remain optional? Voluntary, funded from separate budgets, so public education isn't leveraged for political outcomes, the buzzer sounded. Joy leaned into the mic. But federal funds are taxpayer money. We all pay. Aren't we entitled to shape what goes into schools? Kash nodded firmly. Yes, that's the point. But right now, that shape is defined behind closed doors. Parents should have equal voice. Ideological clauses should be clearly spelled out, no hidden mandates. Joy sat back, eyes steady. You're pushing federalism, states setting rules, but that fragments education. Some kids get equity, others don't. Kash's reply: let's test it. Let parents and communities choose, compete. Let what works be models. If a district wants extra programs, fund it locally or transparently federally with all the strings visible. Joy paused. She tilted her head. You want to defund equity programs if they aren't locally approved? He clarified, not defund. Reallocate funding priorities. Make them optional with full transparency. A few seconds of silence held. The audience was staring. Even casual viewers sensed gravity. Joy finally spoke. So local control, transparency, optional ideology. Understood. Kash nodded. That's the framework. Joy leaned back. Let's test it. Let's let moved school districts share results. Let's let parents vote with their feet. Then judge state by state. Kash smiled. Perfect. We let democracy decide. The segment ended with both of them acknowledging the concept: more transparency, more local, say fewer hidden mandates. Backstage, Kash paused. He felt the shift. The narrative had moved. No longer about fear of wokeness, but about public accountability. Joy exited slowly. Kash prepared for the next segment, mentally organizing thoughts for future hearings and interviews. In the studio, monitors showed trending tags: Zhao taxpayer truths, Zhao's optional see equity, Zhao local choice. A few left-wing voices dismissed it, calling Kash's ideas naive or divisive. But many voters saw him differently, not as a culture warrior, but a voice for transparency. Kash whispered to himself, framing matters. Next, bring in parents who felt powerless. He reviewed notes and an upcoming story about a single mom in Ohio forced to adopt equity drills at her kid's school. That interview would headline the next show. The producer came. Kash live in 2 minutes. Next guest is that Ohio parent. Kash took a steadying breath. He adjusted his tie-checked audio levels and walked onto the set as lights blinked on. He thought of the bigger picture. This wasn't just a TV show. It was a new conversation, a national reassessment of education funding and power. Behind him, the cameras beeped. He faced the audience, ready again. Light softened as Kash Patel stepped into the guest chair beside the Ohio mother Maria Thompson. She wore a nervous, tight smile, clutching her notes. Hot studio lights reflected in her eyes. Kash offered a reassuring nod. Maria cleared her throat. "My name is Maria Thompson. I'm a single mother from Columbus. My son Ethan is in 4th grade. Last year he came home upset. He said they were taught that America's founding was racist at its core. I tried to ask questions. The school gave me a pamphlet about equity education. When I asked to opt him out, they said there was no option. It was part of federal funding tied to curriculum." The camera zoomed in on Kash. His face was calm. He turned to the host. "Maria represents many families. They're asking, why can't parents choose what their children are taught? Why does accepting federal money force certain views?" Maria nodded, voice wavering. "I don't oppose teaching history, but I want balance. Ethan shouldn't leave school feeling ashamed for being American. I asked for surveys before any new lessons." No one responded. Joy Behar leaned forward, tone softer now. "Would you have supported local opt-ins if the school had sent you all curriculum in advance?" Maria wiped a tear. "Yes, but they didn't. They just said the lesson was mandatory." Kash added, "This is the problem, no transparency. Families don't even know what they're opting into. That's why we presented the policy plan earlier. Federal funds for equity programs should require parental approval." "And optional." Joy tapped her pen. "Parents need to know what they're paying for." Maria sighed. "It isn't just about money, it's about values." The next segment presented a split-screen Kash on the left, a glowing infographic on the right. It illustrated school districts with strong parental feedback loops versus districts without. The data showed higher parental satisfaction, stable funding, and moderate improvements in standardized test scores in transparent districts. Joy admitted, "That's impressive," but critics say optional programs will undermine equity for disadvantaged students. "How do you address that?" Kash responded calmly. "Let's take it case by case. If a community wants to ensure equity, they'll fund it. If they don't, we give them alternatives, community grants, partnerships, after-school programs, not forced lessons." He clicked to another slide, success stories and public-private partnerships, local nonprofits offering after-school mentoring and diversity workshops funded regionally, not federally mandated. Joy's expression softened. She whispered in her notes, "Possible compromise." Maria looked relieved. "That gives me hope." The audience applauded. The studio energy had shifted, opponents were listening. Critics were weighing alternatives. During commercial, Kash spoke quietly with Maria. He told her she'd changed the tone. She nodded. "I only spoke my truth. I want my son to love his country and still understand its flaws." As they returned for the closing segment, Kash kept it concise. "Today we heard from a parent who feels powerless in her child's education. We saw data showing voluntary local programs can deliver results. We have a model, optional, transparent, accountable." Joy concluded, "No one wants opaque federal directives. Parents want a seat at the table. So here's what I propose, call it the Parent Choice and Transparency Act. Federal equity funds require local approval with baseline performance metrics and reports made public. Let's see how states choose." Kash smiled. "That's exactly the point." The show ended on that note, a consensus unlikely a few weeks ago. Kash walked off set, planning future moves, drafting federal legislation, prepping for upcoming town halls, lining up endorsements from parent groups. One evening at the Capitol, a hearing convened in the Oversight Committee room. Kash stood at the witness podium again. Now he was testifying before lawmakers, not debate hosts. Reflecting back on Maria's segment, lawmakers leaned in. A congressman from Arizona asked Mr. Patel, "Critics say you're launching a backdoor defunding of federal equity programs. Are you advocating to cut their budgets?" Kash shook his head. "No. I'm advocating for transparency, accountability, and parental inclusion. If programs are valuable, communities will support them. If not, they shouldn't be mandatory. Another lawmaker presented a letter from a teachers' union. They worry districts won't have resources to implement equity initiatives without federal funding. Kash countered, then localities can allocate other funds, state, private grants, community partnerships. Our proposals allow flexibility and choice, not collapse. A third lawmaker, Democratic, interjected, what about disadvantaged schools that lack local capacity? They rely on federal support. Kash nodded gravely. That's why we include a federal grant program to help capacity building but explicitly separate it from curriculum mandates. Parental approval is required for lesson content. Grant dollars can support resources, teacher training without imposing content. He referenced data. Over 60% of school districts surveyed said they'd like more say in curriculum content tied to federal grants. 45% were open to equity programs, but only if parents were fully informed. This isn't fringe, he said. It's majority. Some lawmakers nodded. A few skeptical faces remained concerns about fragmenting national standards, raising equity concerns. Kash answered, national standards remain. We're not dismantling core educational metrics. We are only adjusting how federal money supports supplemental programming. He ended his testimony. We can support equity. We can support parental choice. We can do both if we commit to transparent, accountable, consensual funding. Afterwards, reporters crowded. One asked Mr. Patel, will your act get bipartisan support? He smiled. That's the goal. It passed. The View in a bipartisan way today. Now it's time to pass it in Congress. One reporter quipped, what do you say to critics branding this culture war policy? Kash shrugged. It's not culture war, it's common sense. He walked past the crowd, shaking hands with Maria, who had watched his testimony online. That evening in his Capitol office, Kash reviewed memos. He drafted the bill language definitions of federal supplemental programs, parental consent forms, transparency requirements, data collection mandates. His phone buzzed. It was Maria. Thank you. My son's school is gathering signatures. Parents want this bill. You gave them a voice. Kash replied, that's exactly why we're doing this. He looked at his desktop clock, 10:17 p.m. A headline on Jones's feed, Parent Choice Act gains ground. His phone showed donation buttons lit up. Parental advocacy groups were mobilizing. He leaned back. The momentum was growing, but now came the hard part. A week later, the Senate Education Committee scheduled a hearing. News cameras lined the hallway. Kash arrived with Maria and several other parents. They wore matching pins. Parents want power. Joy Behar, invited as a witness, appeared calm, but her expression suggested she had refined perspective. Inside seating was split. Conservative and bipartisan lawmakers in the center. Dems on right, Republicans on left. Backdrops flanked by U.S. and state flags. Senator Martinez, RFL, opened Mr. Patel and Ms. Thompson. Thank you for joining. Let's discuss whether federal grants should require parental approval for curriculum content. Kash summarized the policy. Maria spoke about her son tearing up as she talked about pride restored when teachers later invited parents to curriculum workshops. She spoke about the power of being included. Joy Behar was next. She acknowledged her earlier skepticism. I now see value in the framework, but safeguards are needed to ensure vulnerable schools aren't left behind. She suggested federal matching grants to help under-resourced districts implement equity programming. Kash accepted the amendment. We'll include that. Lawmakers probed how to ensure schools can't just hide behind parental claims to opt out. What about discrimination? What about accountability? Kash offered detailed parental approval only required for supplemental content, not core math, science, language, arts. All programs must publish annual outcomes. Funds can't just vanish, they shift to a federal block grant for capacity building in under-resourced schools. Senator Harris, DPA, asked what measures prevent the politicization of parental lists. Kash replied, will require neutral approval forms with validated signatures, online verification audits, and anti-coercion oversight. He referenced data from School Pilot program in Georgia under LCEA Local Curriculum Empowerment Act. 92% of parents responded with 78% approving programs, only 8% opted out. Outcomes improved slightly in standardized testing. Parent satisfaction went up 45%. He paused. That's what democracy looks like in action. Out in the hallway, reporters buzzed. Joy and Cash reached a side exit simultaneously. She smiled wryly. "Good hearing today," she said. He nodded. "Your proposal was smart." "Thank you," she nodded. "We'll see how it fares in markup." They parted with mutual respect. Later that night, Cash sat in his study, bare wood desk family photos, draft bill papers. Maria's card lay on the corner. "Thank you, Cash. You gave me courage." He closed his eyes. He thought of the mothers he'd met, of lessons he'd learned. He drafted follow-up emails to education officials, set town halls, and schools scheduled local radio interviews. His assistant alerted him a wave of constituent emails expressing support, donor pledges increasing. National opinion polls showing 58% support for parental funding consent. He leaned back. "This is just the beginning," he whispered. Outside, the Capitol dome glowed. Inside, change was in motion. And in homes across America, parents were starting to believe they could shape their children's classrooms. 2 months had passed since the Senate hearing. The Parent Choice and Transparency Act was gaining bipartisan co-sponsors. Kash Patel appeared on multiple networks explaining how the bill balanced equity with parental authority. Grassroots movements surged online. Parent groups held rallies, posted testimonials, and pressured lawmakers. Meanwhile, Joy Behar released a personal op-ed titled "What I Learned from Listening," acknowledging her early dismissal of Cash's concerns. She called the proposed framework a necessary reckoning in educational governance. Cash responded graciously. That's how democracy should work. Debate, reconsideration, consensus. In late September, the bill passed the House. A week later, it cleared the Senate with amendments for equity assurance and opt-in timelines. President Biden signed it into law on the White House lawn. Cash watched quietly, then smiled. The real victory wasn't political. It was restoring voice to families like Maria's. As fall settled in Cash, Patel returned to quieter work supporting school boards, mentoring policy students, and writing a book on democratic reform through civic engagement. The nation had moved on from the media clash, but the ripple effect endured. Joy Behar invited him back not for a fight, but a discussion. This time the stage was calmer. Cash and Joy shared a laugh about their infamous showdown. "You made me rethink my role," she admitted. "We all need that mirror sometimes." Cash nodded. "And we need platforms willing to evolve." The clip went viral not for its drama but its civility. In classrooms across America, new notices were posted: "Curriculum Transparency Portal. Parents welcome." And in one quiet living room, Maria and her son clicked through the new dashboard, eyes wide. "You did it," the boy whispered. Cash, watching a replay of the session, simply said, "We did."